come on in, push in. No, we should wait, because he might be late.
No.
If you move, he'll come. Plus I can spread out.
Maybe it's wow, snow.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
you had a couple cases here that had already been opened, so you're gonna have to check the quorum, because we got some missing members.
Okay. I'll look at the, as I get to the cases, if they come up, I'll look and see if we have enough people. I'll try to do that on the cycles. I think we'll be fine now.
Yeah, it's just, there was one case, I think you only had 5 members.
Okay.
Wave. Moving time. Hey, Jim, did Butch say he was coming?
He said he was. but- Mr. Kane, are you ready?
Yes, I'm ready when you are.
Call the meeting to order. First order of business is roll call.
Andy Bacon,
Here.
Dave Montoon,
Here.
Jim Miller,
Here.
Eric Curtin here, Chris Souza. Here. Tom Heaney,
Here.
Tom Silvera.
Here.
And Mr. Gambrell's absent. Mr. Hantoon will be voting this evening. Next thing, we're going to read through all the cases, and if you're here to have your case, just raise your hand. If you're not here, you can't, but that way we can sort through whether we're going to continue cases or hear them. So, Mr. Curtin?
Petition of Mary Vidala for variance.
Read the address too.
120 Seascape.
Okay.
So you have two, Mary?
Pardon me?
You have two variances.
Yes.
One of those will be
It's amended.
withdrawn. There
One's
was an
gonna be
amended
withdrawn.
petition.
Yes.
Petition of Miles Standish and Delia Pendleton for a variance, 7 Statues Drive. Petition of Yuri Loparev for a variance, at 8 Namquid.
Now we'll go to the full hearings.
Petition of Atlantic Beach Suites LLC by David Martland.
That petitioner has requested a continuance to the next regular hearing, which
November
is
26th.
November 26th.
Next one. We'll continue that, Mr. Kane.
That's for both of them?
Yes.
That's a separate petition, however, the
Oh, yeah,
So
read it.
petition of Atlantic Beach Suites LLC by Attorney Sean Bouchard.
Same one, Mr.
continue that to 11/26.
Petition of John Bullison, for Jeremiah Lynch.
Good evening. We're going to request a continuance on that as well. We've redrawn the site plan to avoid the need for most, if not all, of the variances. We're hoping to have all of our engineering work done in time to get on the planning board's agenda for November. That may take a couple meetings at the planning board, so it might be safe just to continue this to the January meeting.
Mr. Kane, what's the January meeting? Yeah,
Oh,
'cause
you asked a question, you asked me about next year.
I know.
Let me see. Didn't give you guys calendars yet. Now, there will be a special hearing likely in January because
We're going to miss
Christmas falls
December,
on
right.
regular meeting day this year. So it would be
January 28th, right?
28th, yep.
So 128, Mr.
Thank you.
Lynch?
Yeah, and Mr. Chairman, just by way of some information here, that case has been on the agenda since, I believe, January of 2017. It will be re-advertised once they
Go through planning
identify
board.
what variances aren't going to be needed, but it would stay in the same
Order.
spot on the agenda.
Yeah, I spoke to Mr. Kane, I indicate I'll be submitting an amended petition showing the variances, what's been waived and what we're gonna be looking for, so we'll re-advertise that.
Okay, so
Thank you.
we put that over to January.
Thank you.
Petition of Terrace Cabana LLC, 71 Aquidneck Ave. You here?
Okay,
That's for both a variance and a special use permit. 86 West Main LLC and Casey Smith.
okay.
Petition of 296 Tuckerman Ave by Haran Building, Jeremiah Lynch. That's right.
Okay,
Aquidneck Ave Equities LLC, Carpinato Group.
Mr. Chairman, I received a letter from the applicant. They're requesting a continuance to the next regular hearing on the 26th of November.
okay, we're gonna continue that to 11/26/19.
Petition of Brian and Kerry Holland. Gerard.
Good evening, Gerard Galvin for Brian and Carrie Holland. Mr. Chairman and members of the board, I'd like to request a continuance to the November meeting. If you recall, at the last
Right.
hearing, there were some issues that came up. We are still investigating those and trying to come up with a plan with the building official, and we hope to have something in place to come back before you in November.
Okay, so we're gonna continue to 11/26, Mr. Galvin.
Thank you very much.
Gerard. Samuel's Realty.
We're ready with that one.
Okay. Petition of Exit Strategy LLC. by
Yep.
Matt.
That's two petitions that are currently under development plan review. We should continue those to 11/26.
Very good, Mr. Kane.
Petition of Raina and Dirk Johnson for 68 Riverview.
So that's,
Petition of 515 Tuckerman Avenue by Dave Martin.
A request from the applicant to continue that to 11/26.
that file's not here.
That needs to be re-advertised. There was a notice issue.
So, the next thing we're gonna do, we're gonna read the summary cases in their entirety. After Mr. Curtin reads each one, we're gonna ask if anyone's here to object to it. If there's no objection, we're gonna, after we've read them into the record, we're gonna take them under advisement as one issue and vote on them as summary cases. A summary case is one that has very minimal relief requested.
Petition of Mary M. Vidala for variance of section 603, 701, and 803 to construct a 7x41 deck addition with a left side yard setback of 8 feet, where 15 feet is required. Said real estate is located at 120 Seascape Ave, further identified as lot 78 in tax assessor's plat 115.
Yeah. Mr. Chairman, there's been an amended petition submitted, so I think it would be appropriate for the board to table that one for the time being, vote on the amended petition, and then withdraw, dismiss that one.
Can we read that again? The amended petition of Mary Vidal for variance of section 603, 701, and 803 to construct a 287-foot deck addition with left yard setback of 7 feet 6 inches with 15 feet is required. Said real estate is located at 120 Seasick Ave, further identified as lot 78 on tax assessor's plat 115.
So for that one, we should vote right now, correct, Mr. Kane?
Yeah, if there's no one here to object.
Is there anyone here to object to this petition? Seeing none, I'm going to ask for a motion to dismiss the original petition without prejudice. Do I have a motion?
Motion to dismiss the original petition without prejudice.
Do I have a second?
I second.
Made in second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0. Keep reading
Well, we're going to vote now.
Yep.
Okay. Do I have a-
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second?
all those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0.
Petition of Miles Standish and Delia Pendleton for variance from section 603, 701, and 803 to allow a 24 by 24 one-story two-car garage with the front setback of 26.4 feet, where 40 feet is required. Said real estate is located at 7 Tatchers Drive and further identified as Lot 7 on Tax District Plat 126.
Anyone here to either speak for or against the petition? We're going to carry that one over.
So,
No, we're going to keep going. Yeah. 8 minutes for this next one, right? We'll just vote on them all.
this person was here.
Let's just read it.
Petition of Yuri Loparev for a variance in section 603 and 701 to allow 12 by 26 deck addition with a left yard setback of 13 feet when 15 feet is required. Said real estate is located at 8 Namquid Drive, further identified as lot 188 and Tax District Plat 105.
Is there anyone here to speak against this petition? Seeing none, I'm going to close the public hearing on all summary cases. Can I have a motion to accept all summary cases as read?
Motion to accept all summary cases as read.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0. Okay. So the next one up is going to be, yes, I have it right. Go ahead and read it.
Petition of the Terrace Cabana LLC for a variance from 603, for a variance from section 603, 701, and 803G to construct a 10 by 20 foot second floor deck with a left side setback of 8.3 feet, where 20 feet is required, and a rear setback of 12.8. Where 30 feet is required, said real estate is located at 71 Quidnick Ave, further identified as lot 149, and tax assessor's plat 115.
Is the petitioner here? Come on up and tell us about your petition. Oh, we're done with the summary cases, so if you were here for that, you can take off. Hi.
Hi.
Raise your right hand. Do you swear the testimony tonight will be the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
I do.
State your name and address for the record.
Olga Tregeser, 71 Aquidneck Avenue, Middletown, Rhode Island.
Tell us about your petition this evening.
I have a second floor efficiency, and I'm looking for some outdoor space to kind of go along with that. There's already a deck directly below this area, so I'm looking to just put a deck, not make it any bigger, just the same footprint, and, you know, put a deck right outside the back of the efficiency.
So it's going to be exactly above the other deck, so there'll be
Correct.
no increase in lot coverage?
No increase.
Okay.
Would you like to see a picture?
I'd love to see a picture.
Picture on the first story is patio. It's actually patio.
This actually was in a plan originally,
Uh-huh.
many years ago, and you can see there's already a door
Yep.
leading to nowhere.
That's why they're.
And we just weren't able to finish
Can-
at this time.
Can I keep the picture or do you need it back?
Sure, take the picture.
Yeah, only because I want to put it in as exhibit. We're going to mark the picture Exhibit A.
My name is Olga, O-L-G-A. Tregeser, T-R-A-G-E-S-S-E-R.
We got a cover here.
Oh. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any questions for the applicant?
So is the plan to connect this via, on the picture, changing that window into a sliding door or something to access the deck?
Well, there's already a door.
It's already a sliding door.
Oh, that's a sliding door?
No, it's an actual swinging
Oh, it is, okay. It looked like a big window from here, I'm sorry.
Oh, okay, no.
No
that's
worries.
the door.
Got it.
Yeah, it was actually in the plan like 20 years ago, and it just never was finished.
Get tired of people falling out, so you.
Yeah, well, you see, I,
There's a railing.
Will there be stairs down from the second floor?
not at this time,
Okay.
no, not at this time.
Mr. Kane, we're doing the special use because it's a two-family dwelling?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for the applicant? I think we're good. I'll close and see if anyone.
Okay.
Is there anyone in the audience that would like to speak for or against the petition? Seeing none, I'm going to close the public hearing. Can I have a motion?
Motion to approve?
I second the motion.
Motion made and seconded. Discussion?
I think deck seems reasonable, the least relief necessary for the full enjoyment of the property.
Yeah, I'm going to support it for the same reason. There's no increase in lot coverage, and I think it will maximize the space and allow a little outdoor space, so I'm going to support it. All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0. That was for this, the variance, so if we can do the special use.
Make a motion to approve the special use permit.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0. Thank you.
Petition of 86 West Main LLC.
Oh, we can't do it. Oh, look, we don't have our. We're gonna have to hold you over until the next, we need another solicitor here. So, sorry, that was my bad, I didn't realize. So she should be here any minute. Oh. Yeah, no, we're not holding you over to weeks.
Yeah, I just,
We're talking minutes.
We hope.
I just sent her a message.
Okay, sorry about that. That was,
Next matter, the 296 Tuckerman Ave is
Same problem.
also in the same position, so
okay.
you'll have to skip over
Okay.
678.
678 Aquidneck.
Petition of Samuel's Realty in South Coast Health System by the attorney Gerard Galvin for special use permit for sections 1212B 2 and 1212F to allow signage with reverse channel halo lit letters and allow two signs where one is installed. Said real estate is located at 678 Aquidneck Avenue, further identified as lot 107 on tax assessor's plat 114.
Good evening, Mr.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the zoning board, Gerard Galvin of Galvin Law in Newport, Rhode Island. I'm here representing South Coast Health, who is petitioning for the sign, as you just read. In the petition, you see some images of the signage, and it's also pointed out the areas of the code that we're seeking relief from. My presentation tonight will include some testimony from Brad Silverman from South Coast Urgent Care, as well as Richard Poyant of Poyant Signs and Jim Hould to speak to the special use criteria. I begin with Mr. Silverman,
Okay.
if I could.
Mr. Silverman, raise your right hand. Do you swear the testimony tonight will be the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
I do.
State your name and address for the record.
Brad Silverman, 210 East Street in Foxborough, Massachusetts.
Thank you.
And Mr. Silverman, by whom are you employed?
South Coast Health.
And what's your position there?
I'm an executive director.
Of what branch of South
I
Coast?
oversee urgent care.
Okay. And how many urgent care centers does South Coast operate?
We have 7.
Okay. And what geographic area do you cover?
Wareham, Fairhaven, Lakeville, Dartmouth, Fall River, Seekonk, and the newest location here in Middletown.
Okay, and that's the Middletown office at this address, correct?
Correct.
How long has the urgent care center been open there?
About 6 months, 7 months.
Okay. Now, I know it's to a certain degree self-explanatory, but can you describe the services that the urgent care center is providing to the clients?
Sure, an urgent care center, ours is open 7 days a week, 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. during the week, and 9 to 5 on the weekends. And we offer urgent care, non-life-threatening types of things that would go to an emergency room, but we allow walk-ins, any day of the week for people who have illnesses and need to be treated.
And this urgent care center is a separate entity and business from the other areas of South Coast that may have offices, primary care offices and things like that, correct?
Exactly. So the primary care offices provide care for established patients, or you would have a new appointment and become an established patient, and they typically don't have walk-in hours, evenings, early mornings, and weekends. Okay. So we differ in that regard.
Now, with all the locations you've just referenced, you made an effort at South Coast to make yourself visible and with consistent signage. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And this type of halo lit signage is what you have used at all of your other facilities, correct?
Correct.
And why is that the type of signage you've elected to use?
Well, initially what you said, it established the brand, but I think more importantly, we advise, we try to educate our patients. If you have a life-threatening illness, go to the emergency room. We don't want to see it. And as well as we try to educate, that doesn't always happen. It's not unusual for someone having a narcotic overdose to pull in our parking lot, or somebody having chest pain or difficulty breathing. And so, having a clearly illuminated sign that's visible from the street makes it easier for people to find us in emergency.
Okay. And you typically have your signage illuminated for an hour prior to opening and an hour after close, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Now, these are the types of lights that are triggered by the lack of natural light, right? So that it's when the sun comes up in the morning, the illumination goes off, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And if it's a summer night and it's light out till 8 o'clock in the evening, those lights aren't on until it gets dark, correct?
Correct.
And there's also a timer so that you can shut it off at a set time.
Correct.
And you're looking to do that an hour after you close?
Yes.
Okay. Any other questions for
I
Mr.
understand
Sullivan?
the time and what you, it's good.
Well, could you restate your hours of operation?
We're open Monday through Friday from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. and Saturday and Sunday from 9 a.m. to 5.
And as part of this petition, you're requesting to keep those signs illuminated for 1 hour prior to opening and 1 hour after close?
Correct.
So the idea is for these things not to be lit, all night long, or even, till 11 o'clock or anything like that. Patients will come in right up until closing hour, correct?
Correct.
And they'll still be serviced in there, and the facility will be open for some period of time after the doors are locked. And during that time, they keep it open for an hour, or lit for an hour while business is wrapping up in the facility.
How many physical signs, the petition says 2, is it 2 signs or 1 sign?
So,
2 signs.
we're seeking 1 new sign.
Okay.
On
But you
the-
have an existing sign you're gonna keep?
There's 2 signs currently there. 1 is going to be removed and 1 is going to stay,
Okay,
with the idea of replacing it with this sign on the Aquidneck Ave side.
okay.
Okay.
So this is the new addition where Dr. Ruggiero's office used to be, but they,
I'm not sure what the previous office was. I think that's correct, but it is the one that is
closest to the road.
close to the road,
construction.
closest to the road. And right now, there's a banner, if you drive by.
Right.
Aquidneck Ave. That's where the sign is being proposed to go. And there's some renderings in the petition of what that would look like.
Any other questions? I think we're good, Mr. Galvin.
Okay, thank you. And I would call Richard Poyant for some very brief testimony.
Mr. Poyant, raise your right hand. Do you swear the testimony this evening will be the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
I do.
State your name and address for the record.
Richard Poyant, 15 Tanner Lane, Fairhaven, Mass.
Okay. Thank you.
And Mr. Poyant, where are you employed?
Poyant Signs in New Bedford.
And what's your position there?
president since 2000,
Okay, and how long have you worked in the signage industry?
for over 40 years.
Okay. And you've prepared signs for South Coast for many years, is that right?
We've been providing signage for South Coast for 25 years.
Okay. Now, and their urgent care signages in particular, correct?
We have done all the signage for all of their urgent care locations.
Okay. And when you're determining what type of signage to use for those facilities, what are the types of things you contemplate?
Well, certainly, just the overall visibility, readability based on the type of traffic that is in the neighborhood, what the surrounding environment is like, how patients are going to be approaching the location, the facility, so to be sure that they can see it and find it safely. People are generally, especially going to urgent care, are under stress, and so we don't get too fancy with the letter style and the colors. We want to make sure that people can read the message.
Is that why you light it during the day, so that it pops off the building?
If it gets cloudy, yes.
So, well, actually, why don't we address that now? Can you explain what, now these, and again, I might be phrasing it wrong, but photocell, can you explain that to the
Sure.
board?
So the primary control for on and off lighting for this type of sign would be using a photocell that reads the ambient light and would, as if it gets cloudy or rainy during the day, then it would energize the sign. And then we use a time clock to shut the sign off an hour after the scheduled time that the facility closes.
Okay.
Now, in addition to how it works with the photocell, could you speak very briefly about the advances in internal illumination over the past few years? I think probably even since this ordinance was passed, there have been some advances. Could you speak to that a little bit?
Well, the sweeping change has been really the use of LED lighting in our industry, replacing pretty much completely the use of neon lighting, which is what would have been what was used in this type of sign, because neon tubing can be custom formed to the shape of a letter, and that was the only way to do the lighting. Today, with LED lighting systems, which are far more energy efficient, we can shape them to almost any typeface.
And the impact of the LED light that you can use now versus the fluorescent or neon light of 5 or 10 years ago, what is the impact or the benefit of that if you were, an abutter across the street or a customer? Why is that preferable?
Well, especially in this application where we're proposing a halo illuminated sign, which means the lighting is going to be reflecting indirectly on the background of the building. And so you'll be reading the sign in a silhouette. So at night, the lettering is actually would look black against the illuminated background. And especially in a neighborhood like this is the most subtle and uniform lighting system that we could propose, as opposed to an external floodlighting situation, which then you're trying to light the entire area of that sign from the front, and inevitably you're using about twice the lumen output to be able to accomplish that. So this would be a much easier on the neighborhood in terms of the brightness levels compared to the alternative.
And the external lighting is what's allowed by right currently in the code.
Right.
The internal, this is kind of a more advanced internal lighting is what we need the special use permit for. But ultimately, is it your testimony that this would have less impact on the neighborhood?
Absolutely.
I think that's all the testimony I would be seeking to elicit at this point, unless there's any questions from the board for Mr. Poyer.
Any questions for? I think we're good, Mr. Galvin.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. I will also call Mr. Hula.
Mr. Hu- You swear the testimony this evening will be the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
I do.
State your name and address for the record.
James Hool, 198 Union Street, Portsmouth, Rhode Island.
Mr. Chair, I can go through the whole,
We accept him as an expert
thank you very
with,
much. Mr.
with
Chair.
regards to real estate.
If I could, Mr. Hool, this is a report you prepared for this petition, correct?
It is.
If I could have this marked as Exhibit 1, Mr. Chair.
Marking this Exhibit 1.
And Mr. Hool's CV is attached to that as an exhibit. So, Mr. Hool, we asked you to get involved to assess our petition for this internally lit sign, correct?
That's correct.
Can you describe for us how you went about your analysis as to whether this proposed sign meets the criteria for a special use permit?
Sure. I received the petition, gave me copies of the petition, some of the diagrams involved. I visited the site, I reviewed the neighborhood, looked around the neighborhood, and then came back and put it in perspective, the petitions in perspective of the code and the comprehensive community plan, and formed my opinions as to how the petitions match up with the code.
And there's obviously the standard special use criteria under section 902. There's also additional criteria in the sign ordinance under 1212A. You consider those criteria as well, correct?
I did. Actually, on page 3 of my report, it's skipping ahead a little bit, but on page 3 of my report, I actually looked at the intent of chapter 12 for signs, and it listed A through D, which are already in the code, for what is appropriate for signage. And if you don't mind, I'll just go through that. I'm going to backtrack a little bit. On page 1 or page 2 of the report, I have a photograph of the building, and you can see, I just took this photograph, and you can see where on one of the gables is the banner that is currently in place. That's where the sign is going to go, on that side facing Aquidneck Avenue. There are two petitions that they are seeking. One is that it's a wall-mounted sign with reverse halo-lit letters. Halo-lit letters, it's non-permitted use. However, the code allows the petition for with a special use permit to gain approval for something that is non-permitted. Also, they'll have two wall-mounted signs. The code actually requires one wall-mounted and one freestanding. They have two wall-mounted signs currently on the building. One of those will be removed so that it'll make room for this second one to be also wall-mounted on the side of the building. The two that are in place are actually on the front of the building. And the total area of both signs will be 70 square feet, which is the maximum allowed. So that, again, I looked at the intent of the code. I felt very strongly that the petition fits the intent of the code. The sign is placed on the building. It has, as was testified, it's a very low-intensity lighting, but it'll allow it to be clearly seen, which is important because that side of the road doesn't have any really standout signage for the use that is there. I noticed when I went down to do the inspection that I also went down at night, and that there are soffit lights that fit. Again, if you go back to page 2 and look at the photograph of the building, there are soffit lights that fit, and I'm sorry I didn't take a photograph, but I didn't. There are soffit lights that fit under each of those small gables that are on that side of the building. And so there's a total of 12 soffit lights that are turned on at night and shine down, but they're actually a fairly strong illumination This sign will not be anywhere near as it won't stand out anywhere near as much as the existing lights that are already actually there. So I felt that the sign was not going to create any problems based on the intent of the code. I then looked at what was the requirements of 1212, which are the quality, character, and appropriateness of the sign, the aesthetic impact of the sign on the public right-of-way, the total amount of signage area on the premises, the existing of non-conforming signs, and the site design and layout of the property. I saw that, again, this sign was clearly in conformance with these. It's a high-quality sign. It will show proper character. It's seen as appropriate. The sign will aesthetically impact the public right-of-way in a pleasing manner. There will only be one sign, only two signs on the premises. The one sign currently on the front of the building were removed, and then the small sign over the entry door will remain on the parking lot side of the building. I then looked at the criteria from 902 for special use. It will not result in significant, try it again, it will not result in a significant diminution of property values. I certainly feel there will be no diminution of value. This will be a much lower intensity lighting than the lights that are already there. It will not intrude on the traffic in any way. It'll simply point out for traffic where the urgent care center is located. The uses in the Polo Center are similar. There'll not be any impact. There are some residential uses across the street, but I don't see any of them as having any impact at all, again, because it will be turned off shortly after closing, an hour after closing, as was testified, so I don't think there's going to be any impact. I will not create a nuisance, basically the same reasons. There's nothing that would create any kind of an impact. It's not a special event sign. It has no streamers, banners, flashing lights, moving parts. I did include as an addendum the characteristics of prohibited signs. Section 1208, I looked through those, and I couldn't find anything in there that would be in conflict with the signs that are set up. It will be compatible with the comprehensive community plan. It certainly conforms to the standards of signage. It's in harmony with the code requiring only special use permit. I looked at whether the granting of the special use permit would be detrimental or injure the appropriate use of property in the surrounding areas. We've discussed that. It should not have any impact. And the granting of the special use permit will not result in hazardous conditions. I couldn't find any factors that would create any kind of a hazardous condition. In fact, in a way, it's a safety issue because this is an urgent care facility, and traffic certainly moving northbound need to be notified before they actually get to the building. So I feel overall, looking at Section 12 and at the requirements of special use permit, that this is very much in conformance with the requirements.
Banners coming down.
The banner will come down.
How big's the banner right now?
Brad, do you know how big that banner is? I would be.
About the same size as the sign?
It is.
It's
It is.
Yeah.
It's approximately, that's where the sign will be going.
Sorry, this is just a lot of stuff about a sign. I want to get back to the basics of this.
Absolutely.
This has to do with the type of lighting
Right,
and the fact that there's two signs.
right,
The big sign that faces Aquidneck Ave,
right.
that could be there with a different kind of lighting?
The sign,
The banner, the banner. You could do the exact same sign you're trying to get through right now with a different kind of lighting over that same banner.
well, what you can do is the external, external lighting on it. What we have determined, what the position is of everybody we've talked to in the South Coast is using the internal illumination across the board now, is that the external illumination causes more creep of the lighting and more negative impact than the newer technology illuminating lighting, which you know, this is an area where some areas in town allow the internal illuminated limited business right now, says you need a special use permit, but the external, which we think would have a worse impact on the neighbors, is allowed. So we're asking for the special use permit to do something we think is actually less impactful.
And I'd like to add that it's actually, even in the limited business zone, would be an appropriate and accepted use if it was free, if it was a freestanding sign. So you know, looking at it, when I looked at that, I realized that part of it had to do with the position on the building. If it was very, very high up, then it might have more of an impact. But because this is as low down as it is on the building, I don't see it having more impact than it would if it was a freestanding sign.
So there's no South Coast sign on that big Polo Center sign? This- On the welcome to the Polo Center
No, he's
type of
talking about
sign?
the main sign.
The main sign, there is a,
A little
one of
pale?
those slots,
Yeah.
it does have a South Coast label there, but I will also point out, there's not an urgent care one, and South Coast has a presence in a few of those buildings, and so we feel there's a need for the separate urgent care identifier. And the other thing I just wanted to point out is that in addition to the notice that was published for the abutters, I separately wrote to everybody on the list on Equipment Ave who may have, you know, concerns about looking at this, and inviting them to communicate with me. I heard from one person who talked a little bit about it, but I don't think anybody is here tonight and they're pressing any objection. But I just wanted to let the board know that.
Any other questions for the? Thank you, Mr. Galvin.
It's okay.
Is there anyone here in the audience that would like to speak either for or against the petition? Seeing none, I'm going to close the public hearing. Can I have a motion on the variance first?
Make a motion to approve.
Do I have a second?
Second?
Discussion?
I was most worried about the neighbors' property values across the street. The expert witness can say that it has no effect on the homes, but having a lit sign across the street has an effect on the price of your home, in my opinion. However, since there could be a sign there anyways with a more intense lighting situation by right, I'm going to approve the application.
Any other discussion? I'm going to approve it too. I think it's a reasonable request, especially when you consider that it is an urgent care facility and people are going to be looking for it. So I too am going to support it. If there's no more discussion, all those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0.
Thank you.
Now we've got to jump back to West Main Road. Do you want to finish Brandon and Dirk and then finish up?
do the Johnson petition next, and then that way we can
Yep,
let Mr. McNally be excused.
he gives us a discount tonight, right?
Petition of Brandon and Dirk Johnson for a variance from section 603, 701, and 802B to allow the demolition and replacement of a non-conforming storage barn structure with a right yard setback of 10 feet where 30 feet is required. Said real estate is located at 68 Riverview Ave and further identified as lot 109 at Texas Assessor's Plat 125.
Raise your right hands. Do you swear the testimony this evening will be the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
I do.
State your name and address for the record.
68 Riverview, Dirk Johnson.
Raina Johnson, 68 Riverview Avenue.
Okay, tell us about your petition.
We are asking to have a variance on the setback on the right side of our property to replace a structure that's currently there. It's a historical barn that's basically dilapidated and needs to be replaced. So we are just trying to put up another structure that's more functional, more modern, and we basically want to put it in the same location, at least on the same center line. It's going to be a foot wider, but using the same center line, which currently lines up with the driveway, and also it allows future future space in the property for a septic field, should we need to replace the septic field we have now, which ultimately we probably would have to do in the future. So we need to leave open space that we can accommodate a septic system at some point in the future. So all those things considered, we would like to try to put the building where the current building is.
Okay. How wide is your property? What's the width of the lot?
I can't tell you off the.
It looks pretty narrow in the picture.
94 feet.
Okay. So you're gonna demo the existing one, keep it where it is and just extend it a foot on either side?
Exactly.
Okay. And you're gonna keep it historically, it's gonna look like a barn still?
It's a wood timber barn, post and beam structure, non-insulated slab, cement slab floor with shiplap siding and normal tile roof.
And what do you use the barn for?
It'll be used for mostly storage, and it'll have a garage door, so we can put a car in there, and also for recreational and storage essentially.
Any questions for the petitioner?
Is this something you ordered from a barn company?
Yes.
Is it-
Yes, sir.
So it's pre-constructed?
Yeah, it's going to show up. They can build it in a day
Yeah.
currently.
Did that
So-
have something to do with the extra foot? Just dimensionally, it made more sense?
Yeah,
or-
they have a sort of standard sizing.
Okay.
So this was the standard sizing that, we could basically afford, and we could fit in that same spot.
Not upstairs, is that a loft area? Or-
Yes.
So never an intention to turn this into an apartment or anything down
No,
the road?
sir.
You said non-insulated. Is there any water or any other anything,
We're going to
electricity
put
going to it?
lighting
Or?
for sure,
Right.
and we'll probably run conduit out there for plumbing, at least for fresh water.
Okay.
But there's no plans to put any living accommodations out there.
Any other questions? I think we're good, Mr. Johnson.
Thank you.
Can I ask one more question? There's no, on Riverview, there's no sewer, correct?
No,
Septic only, correct?
yeah.
Thanks. Is there anyone in the audience that'd like to speak either for or against the petition? Seeing none, I'm going to close the public hearing. Can I have a motion?
Motion to approve?
Second.
Motion made and second, discussion.
It's replacing something that's existing. It's a foot wider at one point because of a way the barn company puts things together dimensionally. Probably if it had to be a foot shorter, it would cost $10,000 more, so I get it.
Also, I think the relief that they're looking for is definitely due to the unique characteristic of the lot that you're on. And certainly as far as what they're trying to do, the hardship wasn't created on that they have done in the past.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's the least relief necessary. And I like the fact that it's going back as a barn and not
Well,
a stick-built ugly.
additions, but,
Yeah. So all those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0. Thank you.
now we can go to West Main Road.
Mr. McNally, have a good evening. Do you want to take, Mr. Kane, do you want to take 5, or you want to?
Sure.
We're going to take a quick 5-minute recess. Let's change out the team. just have to check. Chris, you were here for the original testimony. No, you weren't. You were, Mr. Bacon?
I believe so.
Okay, so voting on this case will be, Mr. Huntoon, were you here for the original testimony?
Yes, I
So
was.
it's gonna be myself, Eric Curtin, Tom Heaney, Tom Silvera,
Maybe.
and Andy Bacon. So Mr. Oh, well, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, no, I can't. Okay.
Just, who was voting again?
It's gonna be myself, Eric Curtin, Tom Heaney, Dave Huntoon, and Tom Silvera.
Okay, thank you.
That's how I read it. 1, 2, 3, 4, that's it.
Sounds right.
Raise your right hand. Do you swear the testimony this evening will be the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
I do.
State your name and address.
Nick Santenario, 51 Bliss Mine Road, Newport.
Casey Smith, 51 Bliss Mine Road, Newport.
And we're opening up your existing hearing, so when we last met, we were wondering about compliance, mainly the tank.
Correct.
That was there.
We finally were able to get the tank removed off the property. Amen. We cut ties with that gas dealer. So now we're back at square one, I hope.
And you're working with the fire marshal and getting approval?
Correct. I handed out a one-page little form. In the middle of that is a response that I received from Fire Marshal McCall yesterday at 5 p.m. He read the plan that we had cited last time.
Right.
And there's a brief synopsis of that plan right above it. And he says he has no issue with it as it's written, but he'll obviously need to come and inspect and give the final okay.
So I read that, if we go forward tonight and approve the special use permit, which you're getting for the use of the cryo tanks, it's gonna be contingent on sign off from the fire marshal and of course the building inspector. Are you okay with that?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. So I think that was the only thing we had issue with, correct?
I believe so. I think the major thing was the nitrogen tank.
Any questions for the applicant?
No.
Okay, I'll see if anyone wants to speak for or against this. I think we're good.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you for getting rid of the tank.
We're happy.
Is there anyone in the audience that would like to speak either for or against the petition? Seeing none, I'm going to close the public hearing. Discussion, actually a motion.
I'll make the motion to grant the petition.
Motion made. Mr. Severus, do I have a second?
I'll second.
Discussion?
Well, I'm gonna vote in favor of the petition. I believe that they have met the criteria, and the fire marshal is going to sign off it we didn't put the condition in there, we just put the condition
Yeah.
in there. Maybe I should,
Can you rephrase it?
rescind my, my initial, motion, and then redo it with the condition that the fire marshal has to sign off on it and the building inspector has to sign off on it before they can have their variance.
Okay.
And that's the approval with the special use
Do
permit.
we, Mr. Heaney, do you second that?
I second.
Discussion?
Okay, as I was saying, I'm gonna vote for it because I believe that they've made the effort to comply with all the things that we had asked them to do, and they have the fire department's okay for it, so.
Yeah, I too am going to support it. I think the only question that related to the special use was the safety of the community, and I think they've met that by meeting with the fire marshal and Mr. Kane on the building side, so I too am going to support it. Any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, you ready? Petition 296 Tuckerman Avenue LLC and Haran Building Company, Attorney Jeremiah Lynch for a variance from section 603 to construct an in-ground pool resulting in lot coverage of 29%, where 25% is allowed. Said real estate is located at 296 Peppermint Avenue and further identified as lot 83 in Tax Assessor's Plat 160.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Jay Lynch from the law firm of Moore, Vergadamo and Lynch on behalf of the owner and applicant this evening. Initially, what's before you is a petition for variance for dimensional relief for lot coverage to construct a pool that's 595 square feet. We've noticed that there have been several objections from neighbors to this petition. My client has agreed to amend its application to reduce the size of the proposed pool. So what's before you tonight, what we're going to ask for is relief for a 356 square foot pool, which is 10 feet by 35 and a half feet. As a result of that decrease in size, rather than asking for a 4% lot coverage variance, we're going to be asking for a 2% lot coverage variance. So proposed lot coverage with the 356 square foot pool will be 27%, and 25% is permitted. I have Mr. Haran here, who, if you have any questions, he can answer, but I didn't intend to have for any testimony with him. I do have Mr. Hool, who is going here to testify as to the criteria for the dimensional variance. So if you have any questions of Mr. Haran, I'll put Mr. Hool on first. And while Mr. Hool is here to testify, he did prepare a report.
We're going to mark that Exhibit A.
I'll submit.
I do. Mr. Hool, can you raise your right hand?
I do.
Do you swear the testimony of this evening will be the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Mr. Wool, can you explain to the board the scope of your testimony this evening, what investigation you have in connection with this application?
I received the petition for the dimensional variance, and I visited the site and the neighborhood twice, really looking very closely at the uses that were in the neighborhood, the topography of the site, and where the pool is intended to be located, and looked at its impact to the neighborhood. I looked at the neighborhood in terms of other houses that have received similar relief in the past. I looked to see what houses had swimming pools in the neighborhood. There are actually several that do have swimming pools. And I looked at the petition in light of the criteria for the dimensional variance. So I will say that when I prepared the report, I was looking at the whole 4% increase that was being requested, so that the report reads at 29%, where 25% is allowed, and it may have other references within the report to the 29% rather than the 27% that is now actually being requested, which is a reduction. That is a favorable reduction in terms of the request. When I looked at the 5 criteria, the 6 criteria for the dimensional variance, the hardship from which the applicant seeks relief is due to unique characteristics of the subject land or structure. The house that is being constructed currently occupies 24% of the lot. Now, the coverage allowed is 25%, which only left 1% remaining for any kind of a change and an expansion of the footprint. So I looked at the hardship as truly being just the overall size of the building that was on site. The hardship is not the result of any prior action of the applicant. The petitioner did indeed build the building to the 24% level. But the reality is that I looked at this as sort of a new petition in terms of the fact that since the petitioner has not even finished constructing the house, that it is still under construction. I looked at the entire thing as if it was one original petition for 20%, 27% lot coverage, rather than trying to break down the parts of it. I realize that's fine parsing of it, but I believe it's fairly accurate in this particular case, especially if you look at the other parts of the criteria for the dimensional variance. The granting of the requested variance will not alter the general character of the surrounding area or impair the intent or purpose of the chapter of the comp plan. There is no question in my mind that the variance will not alter the general character of the neighborhood. I looked at 3 items. When I came to that one I referred to earlier, there are several pools in the area. I listed the addresses. I checked these with the both physical inspection as near as I could on each of them, but also I looked at the tax records for each property and confirmed that indeed they had pools on those sites. They are all located very close to the subject property. I then looked at where the pool would be located on the site, and I have photographs that may require a little bit of interpretation, but I stood on the site where these are on page 4 and 5 in my report. I stood at the position on the site where the pool is intended to be built, and I looked at the surrounding areas and shot 3 photographs looking in different directions, sort of trying to do a panoramic type view to show that the actual topography of the lot is such that it's set lower than the houses that are directly abutting it on Walcott Avenue, that the properties on Walcott Avenue there's a banking that can be seen, and there are hedges and things that can be seen, automatic buffering existing buffering that's there, that show that this will actually be a fair amount lower than the properties on Walcott Avenue. I didn't include a photograph, but if you look down toward the east, along the back of all the houses that are being constructed and have been recently constructed on Tuckerman Avenue, their orientation is fully toward the water, so it's not looking over the back of this property at all. So where the pool is actually set on the lot, to be situated on the lot, is very, very private. And it will not really impact any other properties. I couldn't see that it would impact any other property. I also looked to see if there were properties in the neighborhood that actually exceeded the 25% lot coverage. I did find 3 that were immediately around the subject property, 629 Walcott, 585 Walcott, and 316 Tuckerman. They are highlighted on page 6 of my report. I've outlined those 3 to show how close they are to the subject property. In addition to that, 316 Tuckerman, which is the largest, has the most coverage at 2833, was actually given a variance to build that in February of 2017. So that it actually is a very new use that exceeds the lot coverage. I looked at it as the least relief necessary. It's only 2%. I don't see that as a major issue. I believe it is the least relief necessary for a reasonable use in new houses. Very similar to all the new houses. There are 4 in a row that are being constructed right to the east, or have been recently constructed to the east of the subject property. 2 are currently under construction, 1 at the very point, and 1 right next to this property are currently under construction. In granting the dimensional variance, the hardship that will be suffered by the owner of the property is more than a mere inconvenience. I believe that that is really true. I believe this is a reasonable use. The pool is very low. It doesn't block anybody's view. I don't see it as really a hindrance on the neighborhood. I think that the 2% increase is not very great, and we have proof that other properties have that same type of relief in the neighborhood. So I believe that it actually does meet criteria for the dimensional variance.
First question I have is, so based on the proposal, my understanding is that the house that is currently on the lot was built as large as it could possibly be and not
1%
require,
short.
and not require any variances or setback.
That's correct.
Mr. Hool, you said you're considering this one petition. So if let me finish.
Okay, go ahead.
So if it had come as one petition, we'd be sitting here talking about a variance too, right? Because they'd be before us for the whole thing, and we'd be negotiating not only the size of the pool, which I appreciate the applicant reducing the size, but then we'd be horse trading about, you know, look, the house is too big. So when the applicant does it in the order that he's done, right, he's taken away the ability of the board to influence anything, correct?
I don't disagree at all.
And then lastly, and the last thing I'll leave you with is, we throw around this hardship word, right? And hardship, you know, to one person is not having bread on the table, right? This is a spec house that was built as an economic investment. Is the house worth more with a pool or less?
It is probably worth more with a pool.
So how do you argue that it's a hardship and not an economic gain?
It is a
You're the
very
expert.
fine line. I agree with you fully.
I feel like we had our ability to influence the property taken when he built the house.
I don't disagree with you at all. In fact, I had that discussion right away as soon as I looked at the petition. The thing that made me look at it at all was the fact of what the actual request is. That it does seem to, you know, it's not, as I said, it's not going to block views. It's not a huge imposition. It's buffered well from all surrounding areas. It fits, you know, a very typical use. You can see the number of people that actually have pools in the neighborhood. I don't see the request as being a major thing, but I do not disagree with you about the first two criteria.
Any other questions for Mr. Holt?
The other point that I wanted to make that Jim is touching on is that we're stating, or we need to state, that the relief that he's asking for right here is least relief necessary. But we can't calculate that because, as Jim already pointed out, we really have no option. I can't go back to the builder and say, you know, if you made the porches smaller, the overhang less, whatever, then we could get it within that 25 or get closer to that 25. But right now, all we have is take it or leave it proposition is basically what you're saying.
That's right. We've got a situation where we have a house that's got 24% lot coverage. We're asking for additional 2% variance. We're asking increasing by 3%. Those are the facts that we've dealt with. And we're trying to make the presentation that the relief that we're seeking is the minimum relief necessary for the board.
Does your estimate also take into account the flow of the water? If you look at the drawing, with the house covering 24%, the driveway being, looks like a double wide driveway, which is, you know, fine, obviously you'd want that. But then the patio and the pool going in the back, there seems to be very little porous property left for any stormwater to flow to. Which means to me that it's gonna flow either, you can see the directional arrows, it's gonna flow off the property either into the street or into one of the neighbor's yards.
If the board is inclined to grant us the relief, we are going to have to comply with the stormwater regulations. So that's going to be a requirement.
Was the original application submitted with a swimming pool and it was just too much lot coverage, so it was pulled?
I wasn't involved.
We weren't involved.
It was a zoning application.
says on your report that it was billed at 24%, and that was, you know, the original. That's my question. With Mr. Horan, was the original application?
If I may, there was an application for a building permit and a construction site runoff control plan that showed a pool. The original application did show a pool. Then when it was over lot coverage, that was removed.
Okay, thank you.
I can have Mr. Moran answer your questions.
Okay.
He could address this, the same thing Mr. Kane just did. I was just curious about that.
Raise your right hand, Mr. Ryan. Do you swear the testimony this evening will be the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
State your name and address for the record.
Yep, Mark Horan, 15 Berkeley Ave, Newport.
Okay.
So to answer the first question about the drainage, so per the local ordinance, we need to do a soil erosion plan, which we provided and was reviewed and approved as part of our construction. There is a underground storage facility in the front yard, which picks up all the roof runoff. And it meets the town's ordinance as it was passed and reviewed by the town engineer. The pool itself doesn't rep a drainage issue, but the impervious area does. And that was taken into calculation. The terraces around the pool and the patio around the house, as well as the driveway and the roof runoff. All that was considered, and it's in the calculations. So, and reviewed. Regarding the sequence of how this was planned, so a pool was always a consideration. As Mr. Kane mentioned, we were considering the pool from the outset. When we realized it was too big, we backed off on the pool. The reason we're here now and the reason why it was delayed, it was, truthfully, we weren't certain we were going to do the pool. We knew that we got relief at 316 Tuckerman, and we look at this as analogous to that property, and that was done in 17. So it wasn't, would we have modified the house had we not had that information? Perhaps, but we didn't. The information that we had in hand was 2 doors down, we got relief for a pool by summary process. So in this house, we're taking the exact same steps. That house was designed first, the pool permit was obtained later. So that was my thinking, and we've taken into account a lot of variables with this, market, the desirability of the pool, and what else could be done with that land area. So by reducing it as we have from the outset, we think that that's a minimal impact. It's now 10 by 35.6. It's in the backyard, it's buffered by plantings, it's protected either with a fence or an automatic pool cover, or both. I think it'll be a safe condition and designed for the family use.
So that other house, you put an application in, and then you went back and got the pool approved?
That's correct.
From your perspective,
Yes.
how would you, in your own words, define the hardship?
I'll be honest, I'm not here to tell you I have a hardship. That's not, I mean, I don't know, I'm not as versed in the ordinance as Mr. Hull is, but this is a use that we've built quite a few pools in the neighborhood, 578 Walcott, 395, 393 Tuckerman, 585 Walcott. So we have some experience doing it. It's driven by that and the demand that we see. We try to make it as least innocuous as possible, so it's not an inconvenience to the neighbors. I know directly behind this property there's a pool. There are pools very close by, in addition to. So.
With the last application you had,
Yes.
direct abutters that were in favor of it.
That's right.
Do you have any of that? Are there any direct abutters that are in favor that are in agreement with it?
As I recall, it was approved through a summary process, so there were no abutters present.
We definitely.
If I may correct you, that was not done on a summary.
That was a full hearing.
Was it? Oh, I'm sorry.
That's
thought
right.
it was-
I remember specifically. I remember
Okay.
the direct neighbor behind, or a couple of neighbors behind you saying, "Look, we don't have a problem with
Okay.
it." So.
Yeah, I don't know that I couldn't tell you who
Yeah.
testified or what was said.
Any other questions for the applicant?
Can I ask one question from Mr. Hool?
Sure.
If you can come back up.
Yeah, Mr. Holt?
And I apologize if I missed it and you covered it. The properties that do have pools, what are the lot coverages for those existing pools in the area?
The only two that 585 has a 26%. 585 Tuckerman, 585 Tuckerman has a 585 Walcott has 26% lot coverage, and 316 Tuckerman has 2833. I didn't look at the other ones, but by default, that would mean that with the pool, they were under the 25. In other
Right,
words, I
right.
quoted the three
Sure.
properties that I found that had more than 25% lot coverage.
Right.
So therefore, the others would have been lower.
And I guess the reason why I'm asking is that Mr. Randon indicated there were other properties that he had installed either pools on after the fact or maybe with it. And I'm just trying to get an understanding of, in addition to these other three, because I believe you mentioned several other properties, were all of those other properties where the pools were installed, were those still under the 25% lot coverage after the pools had been installed? So these are the only three that you could find that exceeded, that had pools that exceeded the 25%?
That's correct.
Okay, I just want to make sure.
And one of the other problem, or not a problem, but one of the other factors that I noticed that the sizes of the lots in the neighborhood range so dramatically that it's very difficult to draw a real parallel. You know that the house that is right at the end of Tuckerman Avenue Tuckerman Avenue right now to the east, that's being constructed, the house itself has a facade that looks much more imposing than almost any other house, but I realize when you go by it's very flat. And looked at the lot coverage, it appears to be right at the maximum of allowable lot coverage, but the lot itself is very small. So, which is why they made this sort of slice of bread type house. you
Right.
know.
Any other questions, Commissioner?
I don't have any other further testimony
Thank you,
this
Mr.
evening.
Lynch. I'd like to open up to the public. Is there anyone in the audience that'd like to either speak for or against the petition? Come on up. Raise your right hand. Do you swear the testimony this evening will be the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
I do.
State your name and address for the record.
My name is Dyer Jones. I live at 306 Tuckerman Avenue, which is directly abutting to the south, the subject property. I am here because my wife could not be, and she wrote a letter to this board last week, which was sent to Mr. Kane. Can I assume that the board has seen it, and as well as Mr. Lynch, Mr. Horan? Does the board have any questions of me with respect to the letter? Okay. I have very little to add other than a couple of things. In the case of 316, which is the house that Mr. Horan built, it's on the south side of us. The current construction is on the north side of us, so we're sort of the meat and between the bread and the sandwich. We would have objected at the time to the construction of the pool at 316. It exceeded the allowed lot coverage. Unfortunately, at the time, my mother-in-law was living in the house, and she's 99 years old. I think she was 97 and a half at the time. Those kinds of pieces of mail didn't get her attention, but we would have objected. In addition, I think Mr. Hoole's comments are somewhat specious. He is referring to properties in a fashion where I don't think it takes account for the codes that are enacted here, which you operate under, both with regard to dimensions and variances. And he cites precedent. I find precedent to be somewhat a difficult matter to actually to find any substantive words in the regulations. Otherwise, I have very little to add to the letter which Mrs. Jones wrote, and I appreciate your hearing us. Again, if there are no questions, I have finished.
Thank you, Mr. Jones, and we do have a copy of your wife's letter, and it is part of the file.
Thank you.
Thank you. No, it's already, it's in. Raise your right hand. Do you swear the testimony this evening will be the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
State your name and address for the record.
My name is Ellen Evans. I live at 274 Tuckerman,
Okay, thank
which
you.
is abutting on the north side of
Okay.
this property. I really appreciate the questions that you all have asked so far. They have been very relevant to our concerns. I fully support Mr. Jones and his wife's comments. I think they are very important in this case. My family, I will just take 30 seconds. My family bought the property on Easton's Point in the 30s. We have lived there consistently, either my parents, myself, somebody, my sister and brother-in-law lived behind us. My brother-in-law died last year. We have seen a drastic change in what has happened mainly to this part of Easton's Point. And it is of great concern to me what has happened. My husband and I moved into my parents' smaller house, which was, and enlarged it 20 years ago. We thought it was a big enlargement. Now you can hardly see it. If any of you have driven up Tuckerman Avenue and around the point, you will be shocked beyond words what has happened. I want to point out one thing on here, on Bird Jones's comments, that seems to me a really important line. The petitioners could have included a pool in the plot plan without asking for a variance, but that would have required construction of a slightly smaller house, less lot coverage, and a more ecologically friendly landscape design. Drive by, think about that, and vote accordingly. Thank you very much, all of you.
Thank you. Raise your right hand, sir. Do you swear the testimony this evening will be the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
I do.
State your name and address for the record.
Thomas Evans, spelled E-W-E-N-S, 274 Tuckerman, husband of Ellen Evans, who just spoke. I have no intention of taking more than a minute or so of your time, but since I'm also in a butter, have lived there for 20 years, have seen the changes, have seen the number of variances that have been allowed in the neighborhood, including across the street, several times, just as in this case, the architects and the owners had plans in, never in their plans took account of what the square footage was. I'm very glad that my wife repeated what Mr. Miller had already said earlier with regard to the current situation. The last thing I'd say is, I don't need to tell you that, but there are an awful lot of citizens who, I think with me, agree that the code is not done by chance. It's a serious document that should be taken very seriously. And if variances are going to be given, they ought to be strongly supported, which these are not. We worked with Mrs. Jones. She came and discussed her letter with us. We helped with it. We didn't sign it. She did, but we agree completely with it. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Raise your right hand. Do you swear the testimony this evening will be the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
I do.
State your name and address for the record.
110 Indian Hill Road. My concern, and it has been for a long time, is the development and the lack of ground absorption for rainwater, groundwater, stormwater. And as Mr. Kane has said, the original plans called for a pool, but because it exceeded the lot coverage requirement, it was removed. Now, it's back, they're back asking for a variance. I don't see this as a hardship case. They say, well, it doesn't block anybody's view, but that doesn't solve the problem. We have zoning and it has to be adhered to. If not, then why do we have it in the first place? It's to protect the town and the people. So, I'm sure the drainage plan was made assuming no pool, and ground absorption was made or estimated without the pool. If they wanted the pool, they should have built a smaller house, not cover 24% of the lot and then come back for an exemption. Sometimes we make decisions in life and we find that maybe we should have done things differently, but it's something that we have to learn to live with. And I urge the not granting this variance.
Thank you, Mr. Antone. Anyone else in the audience like to speak either for or against the petition? Seeing none, I'm going to close the public hearing. Can I have a motion on the petition?
Make a motion to grant the variance.
Motion made by Mr. Heaney. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Curtin. Discussion?
I think I'll just continue the discussion that I started earlier. I strongly believe that this hardship was created based on the prior actions, and therefore it was due to prior actions, and I'm not going to support it.
I agree with my colleague. I looked at the petition and I really feel that it's an economic gain. I mean, clearly, it's economic gain. And it's not a hardship, and it's not unique to the particular piece of property because it's being built right now. So it's not a prior act, it's an ongoing act. And for that reason, I can't support it. It doesn't meet the criteria on a couple of fronts. The hardship, and I really think that when it's not included in the original application, it takes away the zoning board's ability to function. And now we're doing it, 2 years from now, if a new owner comes up in front of us, they didn't make the decision to build the house that's gonna cover the lot at 24%. So then it is unique to their situation. But today, the builder is here saying that, oh, I've got a hardship. I don't accept that. So I'm gonna vote against it.
I'm also gonna vote against the application. The hardship is a result of a prior action by the applicant, and I believe, I think I heard his own real estate expert admit that the house would be worth theoretically more money with a pool, so there is financial gain
Right.
there as well.
Any other discussion? All those in favor? All those opposed?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion does not pass. It's down 5-0. 0-5. Do I have a motion to close the meeting?
Motion to close the meeting.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Motion made. All those in favor?
7:32.